The abandoned warehouse loomed like a forgotten relic on the edge of the city's industrial district, a hulking structure of cracked concrete and rusted steel beams. Its broken windows were patched with weathered plywood. Graffiti smeared across the walls in layers of faded colors, telling stories of neglect and rebellion. A bitter wind swept through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint smell of oil and decay. Against this desolate backdrop, Emma trudged forward, her silhouette framed by the dull gray sky. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, now undeniable, even beneath the loose jacket she wore. The warehouse was hers, or at least she had managed to rent it for a small sum, a place she could call her own in a city that had seemed to close every door on her. As she approached the heavy metal entrance, the cold wind tugged at her scarf, a reminder of the harsh world outside, one that had been unkind for months now. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Just 3 weeks ago, Emma had been working at a small bookstore downtown, her days filled with the quiet comfort of paperbacks and the occasional customer. It was a simple life, but one she had cherished despite its modesty. Then came the news that changed everything. She was pregnant. The moment she told her family, the fragile support she had counted on crumbled. They turned away, unwilling or unable to accept the new reality she carried within her. "I'm sorry, Emma," her mother had said during one of their last conversations, voice tight with disappointment. "We just can't help you like this." Her father's silence had spoken volumes, and with no safety net beneath her, Emma's world began to unravel. Losing her job followed swiftly after her announcement, a cold dismissal masked as unfortunate timing by her employer. Bills piled up. The eviction notice arrived, a cruel reminder that her small apartment was no longer hers. With nowhere else to turn, she had searched desperately for shelter. Homeless shelters full, friends unwilling to take risks, and shelters for pregnant women overwhelmed and distant. The warehouse was her last hope, a place she had stumbled upon in a faded newspaper ad. Its promise of affordable rent a thin thread she clung to amid the chaos. Now, standing before its towering gate, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination swirling inside her. She pushed open the creaking door, the sound echoing in the cavernous darkness beyond. Her flashlight flickered on, casting a narrow beam across the dusty floor, littered with broken pallets and scattered debris. The air was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of rust and forgotten years. Emma took a tentative step inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. Her breath came in shallow gasps, partly from the chill, partly from the heaviness of her condition. She scanned the vast interior, the high ceiling lost in shadows, broken skylights leaking slivers of pale light. The walls bore layers of peeling paint, and in one corner, a collapsed shelf spilled remnants of old crates and scattered papers. Emma knelt down, brushing a thick layer of dust from a nearby crate. Her fingers traced the rough wood, worn smooth by time. The silence pressed against her, broken only by the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe overhead. It was a lonely sanctuary, yet somehow it felt like a beginning. Her mind drifted back to the moments leading up to this point. The nights spent curled in a borrowed coat on cold park benches, the faces of strangers who looked away when she asked for help. The bitter sting of isolation gnawed at her. But beneath it all, a fragile hope glimmered. If she could make this place her own, perhaps it could shelter not only her body, but her spirit as well. Outside, the neighborhood stirred with quiet suspicion. Emma had noticed the wary glances from passers-by as she moved her few belongings into the warehouse earlier that day. Whispers followed her steps. Words like crazy and reckless floated on the wind, mingling with the clatter of nearby construction and the distant hum of factory machinery. Pregnant, alone, and choosing to inhabit a place shunned by most. Some saw her as a symbol of defiance, others as a cautionary tale in the making. She pressed her palm against her belly again, feeling the faint flutter of life inside. A reminder that she was not truly alone. This child was a promise, a future she was determined to fight for, no matter the odds stacked against her. Emma moved deeper into the warehouse, her flashlight revealing more of the sprawling space. She found remnants of its past life. Rusted tools, broken machinery parts, and faded posters advertising events long since forgotten. The building bore the scars of time and neglect. Yet beneath the dust lay a resilience waiting to be awakened. She paused near a cracked window, wiping grime from the glass to catch a glimpse of the street beyond. The city stretched out in muted tones, a landscape of concrete and steel punctuated by flickering streetlights. Somewhere out there, life continued in its chaotic rhythm, indifferent to her presence or absence. Her thoughts wandered to the nights ahead, the challenges she would face raising a child in a place like this. But for now, the warehouse was a shelter against the storm, a cold but steadfast refuge from the harshness of the outside world. Emma sank down onto a pile of old wooden crates, the rough surface digging into her legs through thin fabric. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of exhaustion pull at her. Memories of harsh words exchanged with her family surfaced again, their disappointment, their fear, and ultimately their rejection. The loneliness was a heavy companion, but it had taught her one thing. She could rely only on herself. Her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of a small scar on her wrist, a relic from a past injury that had long since healed. But this, she thought, this unborn life was different. It was fragile, yet fierce. It was a chance to rewrite the story that had been handed to her. As the afternoon light waned, Emma stood and stretched, her joints aching from the strain. She surveyed the warehouse once more, imagining the possibilities hidden within its vast emptiness. Perhaps she could clear a corner to create a safe space, set up a small cot, and carve out a semblance of home where none had existed before. The wind picked up outside, rattling the broken panes and sending a chill through the air. Emma wrapped her jacket tighter around her and moved toward the entrance, her footsteps echoing softly behind her. She paused at the door, casting one last glance into the shadowed interior. This place was more than just a shelter. It was a fragile promise of hope amid despair. And as long as she could hold on to that hope, Emma knew she could face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with hardship, but within her grew a quiet strength, born from loss and tempered by the relentless desire to protect the life she carried. She stepped back out into the fading daylight, the warehouse standing silent and waiting behind her. The city's harsh whispers surrounded her, but she walked on, determined, unyielding, and ready to turn this forsaken place into a sanctuary for herself and the child she was soon to bring into the world. The morning light seeped through the fractured skylights, casting mottled patterns across the dusty floor of the warehouse. Emma moved slowly, acutely aware of the weight pressing against her abdomen with every step. The air was thick with the scent of rust and forgotten years, and the faint hum of the city beyond the walls seemed distant, muffled by the warehouse's vast emptiness. She had decided to spend the day cleaning and exploring this strange new home, hoping the physical labor would distract her from the gnawing uncertainty that crept into her thoughts. With a damp rag in one hand and a broom in the other, Emma set to work, sweeping away layers of grime and cobwebs from the corners and surfaces. Every motion stirred up clouds of dust that danced in the shafts of light, settling again onto the neglected wood and concrete. The neighbors had begun to take notice of her presence. From the cracked windows of adjacent buildings and the sidewalk across the street, Emma caught wary, sometimes scornful glances. She heard the muffled whispers as she unloaded the few belongings she had brought: a battered suitcase, a small bundle of clothes, and a worn blanket. Some called her reckless. Others whispered that she was unstable, a pregnant woman courting danger by moving into such a forsaken place. One afternoon, a group of teenagers lingered nearby, their laughter sharp and mocking as they passed by. "Look at her," one sneered, "living in that dump while she's about to pop. What's she thinking?" Their words stung, but Emma refused to let them see her falter. She squared her shoulders and pressed on, determined to carve out a space for herself despite the judgment. Inside the warehouse, Emma's flashlight illuminated corners she had yet to explore. She moved cautiously, her steps echoing in the cavernous interior. Under a collapsed shelf, she found old crates stacked haphazardly, their wood splintered and worn. Curious, she knelt to inspect the markings on their sides, faded stencils, numbers, and symbols that hinted at a past life she could only guess at. Her fingers traced a series of strange, looping marks scratched into the dusty wall nearby, almost like a code or a message left behind. They tugged at her curiosity, whispering of stories untold. The warehouse was not just empty space. It held secrets buried beneath years of neglect. Emma felt a flicker of connection to the place, as if it were waiting for someone to uncover its past. Memories of her own recent struggles pressed in on her. The sharp arguments with her family, their cold refusals, the nights spent alone and afraid. Each memory a jagged shard in her heart. She remembered the last time she spoke to her mother, the trembling in her voice as she begged for understanding, only to be met with silence and disappointment. The isolation was suffocating, a heavy cloak she could not shrug off. Yet within her grew a quiet defiance. If the world refused to accept her, she would create her own sanctuary. The warehouse, with all its flaws and shadows, was the canvas for that hope. As Emma explored further, her flashlight caught the glint of something beneath a pile of rubble. She knelt and cleared away the debris to reveal an old tin box, its surface rusted but intact. Inside were brittle photographs, yellowed with age, showing groups of people standing proudly in front of the warehouse decades earlier. Their faces were stern but hopeful, as if they had once shared a purpose tied to this place. Among the photographs, Emma found faded letters and notes, fragments of a story she could only begin to piece together. They spoke of a community that had once gathered here, a collective that had supported one another through hard times. It was a history unknown to her, yet it resonated deeply, as if the warehouse had been waiting for her arrival all along. Outside, the murmurs from the neighborhood grew louder. Some residents expressed concern that Emma's presence would bring trouble or attract unwanted attention. Others whispered that she was a burden, a symbol of the city's forgotten and discarded. The weight of their judgment was palpable, but a few faces showed quiet sympathy. A nod from a passing woman, a small wave from a man watching from his porch. One such neighbor was Luis, a young single father who lived a few blocks away. He had noticed Emma's resilience and the determination etched onto her features. One afternoon, he approached cautiously, offering a smile and a bag of groceries. "Thought you might need these." he said softly. It's not much, but it's something. Emma accepted the gift with gratitude, the gesture a small balm to her weary spirit. Louise became a quiet presence in her life, a reminder that even in the harshest places, kindness could be found. As days passed, Emma began to shape the warehouse into a semblance of home. She cleared a corner near a cracked window, setting down a thin mattress and arranging her few possessions with care. The space was stark and cold, but it was hers, a promise of shelter against the storm. Yet the warehouse's mysteries continued to beckon. One evening, as twilight deepened, Emma's flashlight revealed a narrow gap behind a stack of crates. Pushing aside the wood, she uncovered the outline of a small door hidden within the wall, concealed for who knew how long. Her heart quickened with a mix of fear and excitement. The door was locked, its surface worn smooth by time. Emma searched nearby and found a rusted crowbar, using it to pry the door open with effort. Inside was a tiny room, no larger than a closet, filled with carefully preserved items, journals bound in cracked leather, stacks of photographs, and blueprints yellowed with age. The discovery felt like a gift, connecting Emma to the warehouse's past and to the people who had once breathed life into its walls. The journals were filled with stories of struggle and solidarity, of a community that had banded together to survive and protect one another from hardship. Emma traced her fingers over the pages, feeling a kinship with the unknown authors. Their words spoke of hope and resilience, themes that mirrored her own journey. This place, once dismissed and derided, held a legacy of strength that now became her anchor. Though the whispers and judgment from outside continued, Emma's resolve hardened. She was no longer just a pregnant woman living in a forgotten warehouse. She was a guardian of a hidden history and a bearer of new life. The warehouse, with all its scars and secrets, was becoming a sanctuary. Not just for her, but for the future she was determined to build. As the city settled into night, Emma lit a small lamp and sat cross-legged on the cold floor, surrounded by the fragile remnants of another time. Outside, the world moved on. But inside, a quiet revolution was unfolding, a reclamation of hope in the face of despair. And with every breath, Emma prepared herself for the battles yet to come. The hidden room's stale air mingled with the faint scent of aged paper and ink as Emma carefully lifted the leather-bound journals from the crate. Their covers, cracked and softened by time, told stories of lives once lived within these walls, lives full of purpose and quiet courage. She cradled one volume to her chest, a fragile bridge between past and present, and settled herself on the cold concrete floor beneath the fractured skylight. The warehouse was silent, except for the soft rustling of pages as Emma began to read. The handwriting was meticulous, looping elegantly across the yellowed sheets. The entries spoke of a collective, a small, tight-knit community that had called this warehouse home decades before. They had been a group of families and individuals marginalized by society, banding together to create a safe haven in a city that had turned its back on them. Emma's eyes scanned a letter tucked between the pages, addressed to the future caretaker. The words were urgent, filled with hope and a plea for protection. The author spoke of a legacy, a promise to preserve the spirit of shelter and solidarity that had once flourished here. It was a call to arms disguised as a letter, a message meant for someone like Emma, someone who could see beyond the decay and understand the warehouse's true heart. The letter's closing lines resonated deeply. To whoever finds this place, may you carry forward our hope and guard this sanctuary for those who need it most. You are not alone. A sudden sound broke the stillness, a soft shuffle outside the door. Emma's heart quickened the weight of her pregnancy pressing against her ribs. She hurriedly closed the journal and stowed the letter back in the crate, her flashlight flickering as she rose to her feet. Peering through the narrow doorway, she spotted an elderly man standing hesitantly in the shadows. His eyes, sharp despite the years etched into his face, reflected a mixture of curiosity and recognition. "Mr. Caldwell?" Emma's voice was tentative, unsure if she had the right name. The man nodded slowly. "That's me. I've lived in this neighborhood all my life. I remember when this place was alive." Emma stepped forward, the sense of connection immediate. "I found these journals and letters. They talk about a community collective. Can you tell me more?" Mr. Caldwell smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. This warehouse was more than just a building. It was a refuge. Back in the day, folks like us, families pushed to the edges, came here to support one another. Food, shelter, protection from the city's harshness. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Emma listened, enraptured as he shared memories of gatherings in the warehouse's vast rooms, where children played beneath the beams and neighbors sat around makeshift tables sharing meals. The collective had been a lifeline, a symbol of hope in a time when hope was scarce. "But why did it fall apart?" Emma asked quietly. "Times changed. The city grew and people moved on. Some things get lost when the world shifts too fast," he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. But the spirit never truly died. Emma felt a swell of gratitude for this unexpected. Mr. Caldwell's stories painted a vivid picture of resilience and community, a stark contrast to the cold, empty space she had first encountered. The warehouse was no longer just a shelter for her. It was a living testament to those who had fought to survive before her. As the afternoon sun filtered through the grime-streaked windows, Emma and Mr. Caldwell examined the journals together. The entries detailed efforts to create underground networks, secret meetings, and shared resources. There were mentions of blueprints, plans for hidden rooms and tunnels designed to protect residents from outside threats. Emma's pulse quickened. If these tunnels existed, they could hold the key to understanding the warehouse's full potential. A sanctuary built not only with walls, but with layers of protection and secrecy. Outside, the neighborhood's whispers continued. But Emma found renewed strength in the knowledge she was part of a larger story. The warehouse was not merely a relic, but a beacon of endurance, waiting for someone to carry its legacy forward. Mr. Caldwell paused, then said, "You're not the first to come here looking for answers, but I believe you might be the one who can bring this place back to life." His words settled over her like a mantle, a responsibility both daunting and invigorating. Emma knew the path ahead would be difficult, but the warehouse's hidden history had ignited a fire within her, a resolve to protect this sanctuary and the hope it represented. As evening shadows lengthened, Emma packed the journals carefully back into the crate. She glanced once more at the small locked room, now a treasure trove of past lives and lessons. The warehouse's secrets were no longer buried. They had found her, and she was ready to listen. Stepping outside, the chill of dusk wrapped around her, but the weight on her heart felt lighter. The warehouse, with all its scars and stories, was no longer just a refuge from the cold world. It was a home with a history, and a future that Emma was determined to shape. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement as Emma sat on the worn steps outside the warehouse, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. Beside her, Mr. Caldwell unfolded a set of brittle papers, careful not to let the edges crumble under his fingers. The blueprints spread out between them revealed intricate designs, Hidden rooms, underground tunnels, and passageways snaking beneath the warehouse floor. Emma traced the faded lines with her fingertip, a mixture of awe and disbelief settling in her chest. These were not just architectural plans. They were a blueprint for sanctuary, a testament to the foresight and resilience of those who had once called this place home. The tunnels had been designed to provide shelter during times of crisis, a hidden network of protection that few even knew existed. Mr. Caldwell's voice was soft but steady as he explained. These tunnels were more than escape routes. They were lifelines. Back then, the city wasn't kind to folks like us. We needed places to hide, to regroup, to care for each other when the world outside turned hostile. Emma nodded, the weight of history pressing down on her. She felt a profound connection to these unknown ancestors, people who had built not just walls, but hope itself. Their legacy was a lifeline she was now holding in her hands. Among the scattered papers, Emma found a letter addressed to the future caretaker. The same phrase she had seen in the journals. The words echoed a warning and an urging, a plea to protect the warehouse's legacy and to honor the spirit of community it embodied. It spoke of struggles against eviction, battles to preserve the space, and the importance of sheltering those in need. Reading the letter, Emma felt a surge of resolve. This was more than a building. It was a beacon of hope, a symbol of resistance against a world that too often left people behind. The warehouse had been a sanctuary once, and it could be one again. As dusk deepened, a quiet determination settled over Emma. She looked up at the crumbling facade, imagining the lives that had passed through its doors, the laughter of children, the whispered plans of neighbors protecting one another, the shared meals and stories that had filled these empty halls. Her thoughts drifted back to her own struggles, the harsh words of family, the cold rejection, the nights spent searching for a safe place to rest. The warehouse's history mirrored her journey in a way that was both painful and inspiring. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, community and hope could thrive. The following days brought a renewed sense of purpose. Emma began to explore the warehouse with fresh eyes, guided by the blueprints and Mr. Caldwell's memories. She found a loose floorboard near the back wall and, with effort, pried it up to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A rush of excitement and apprehension filled her chest as she grabbed her flashlight and climbed down. The tunnel was narrow and cold, the air heavy with dust and the scent of earth. The walls were lined with old brickwork, worn smooth by time. Emma's light flickered across the space, revealing alcoves and small chambers carved into the stone. It was clear this network had been carefully constructed to shelter people, a hidden refuge beneath the city's indifferent surface. Her footsteps echoed softly as she ventured deeper, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading to rooms that once held supplies and places to rest. Emma imagined the families who had sought safety here, their fears and hopes intertwined with the very walls. Emerging back into the main warehouse, Emma felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The knowledge of what lay beneath gave new meaning to the space she had claimed. This was more than shelter. It was a home with a soul. Outside, whispers from the neighborhood had grown louder, some voices skeptical, others curious. Yet a few kind faces had begun to emerge. Luis, the young father who had offered her groceries, stopped by with a small hand-me-down crib and a box of baby clothes. His quiet support was a balm against the harshness she faced. Together, they spoke of plans, not just for survival, but for revival. Emma envisioned transforming the warehouse into a sanctuary for others like her, a place where expectant mothers and struggling families could find safety and community. The blueprints and journals were their guide, the legacy of those who came before, lighting the path forward. As days turned to weeks, Emma and Luis gathered a small group of neighbors willing to help clean and repair the space. They cleared debris, patched holes, and started to map out how the tunnels could be restored. The work was hard, and sometimes hope wavered under the weight of exhaustion and doubt. But each small victory, an intact window, a repaired wall, became a testament to their shared resolve. Emma often found herself sitting quietly in the hidden room, surrounded by the journals and letters, drawing strength from the stories of resilience and solidarity. The warehouse's past was no longer a distant memory, but a living force driving her forward. One evening, as the sky deepened to navy, Mr. Caldwell returned with news. He had spoken to old friends, people who once belonged to the collective or knew of its history. Some still held legal documents and records that could prove the warehouse's status as a protected community trust, a crucial piece in the fight to preserve the space from looming development threats. Emma's heart swelled with cautious hope. The battle ahead would be difficult, but armed with history, community, and a shared vision, they stood a chance. That night, as she lay on her thin mattress listening to the city's distant hum, Emma felt a profound sense of purpose. The warehouse was no longer just a refuge from the cold world. It was a symbol of endurance and hope, a legacy she was now entrusted to protect and revitalize. With her unborn child moving gently beneath her fingertips, Emma closed her eyes, readying herself for the challenges to come. The warehouse's story was far from over, and she was determined to write the next chapter. The days grew shorter, and the chill of early autumn settled over the neighborhood, threading through the cracked windows and rusted doorways of the warehouse. Emma moved with quiet purpose, her steps heavier now as the weight of her pregnancy deepened. Yet her resolve remained unshaken, a steady flame burning amidst the cold uncertainty that clung to the streets outside. The neighborhood's reaction to her presence was a tangled web of whispers, glances, and judgments. From the cracked stoops and distant doorways, Emma could feel the weight of suspicion pressing down. Some neighbors muttered about the danger she might bring. Others questioned why a pregnant woman would choose to live in such a forsaken place. "She's asking for trouble," one elderly man said with a shake of his head. "No good will come of it." But beneath the murmurs of criticism, a quieter undercurrent of concern and curiosity began to emerge. A few neighbors, hardened by their own struggles, saw something different in Emma's determined eyes, a spark of hope and resilience. Luis, the young single father who had grown into a steadfast ally, was among them. He brought over meals when she was too tired to cook, offered to help repair the broken window panes, and lent a steady hand when the weight of the warehouse's restoration pressed heavily upon her. Yet the hostility from some in the community was unmistakable. One afternoon, as Emma carried a battered box of supplies into the warehouse, a group of men loitering nearby exchanged harsh words. "That place is cursed," one spat, his voice rough. "She's just wasting her time and our goodwill." Emma's heart tightened, but she refused to let their words break her. Instead, she focused on the small victories, the patching of a leaky roof, the clearing of debris from the tunnels below. Each act of restoration was a quiet defiance against the doubt and derision. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with dust and the scent of wood and rust. Emma had begun to create a small haven in one corner, a fragile home amid the decay. A threadbare blanket lay over a makeshift mattress, and a small table held a few treasured items: a worn journal, a candle, and a faded photograph of a woman she barely remembered but felt connected to. Her fingers brushed over the photograph often, a reminder of the family she had lost and the future she was fighting for. The loneliness was a constant companion, but it was tempered by the occasional kindness of those like Luis and a few other neighbors who slowly stepped forward from the shadows. Rumors began to swirl through the neighborhood that the warehouse was on a list for demolition, targeted by a powerful development company eager to reshape the area with luxury condos and commercial spaces. The news spread like wildfire, igniting fear and anger in equal measure. One evening, as Emma sat by a small stove warming a cup of tea, a sharp knock echoed through the warehouse. She opened the door to find a man in a crisp suit, his smile thin and calculating. "Ms. Rivera," he said smoothly, extending a hand she did not take. "I'm Mr. Grayson, representing the development firm interested in this property. We'd like to make you an offer." Emma's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in selling." Mr. Grayson's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of impatience. "It's a generous offer, far above market value. You'd be wise to consider it. This place isn't safe for you or your child." "I'm not leaving," Emma said firmly. "This warehouse means more than just a building to me." The man's gaze hardened. "You don't understand the forces at play here. This neighborhood is changing, and you're standing in the way." As he turned and walked away, Emma felt a cold tremor ripple through her. The battle for the warehouse was no longer just about shelter. It was about survival, legacy, and fighting against a tide determined to erase what little remained of their community. In the days that followed, the hostility from some neighbors grew more overt. Threatening notes were left pinned to the warehouse door, and strangers loitered nearby, their presence a constant reminder of the precariousness of her situation. Yet amidst the rising tension, a small group began to rally around Emma. Luis organized meetings in the warehouse's main hall, inviting neighbors and local activists to share their stories and concerns. The space, once silent and empty, hummed with whispered plans and quiet determination. They spoke of petitions, of city council hearings, and of raising awareness to protect the warehouse's history and the people it sheltered. Emma listened, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the growing solidarity was a lifeline she clung to. One afternoon, as she rested against a cracked pillar, a young woman approached, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to help," she said simply, offering Emma a bag of canned goods and a warm smile. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In a world that had often turned its back, the warehouse was becoming a beacon for those who refused to be forgotten. As the autumn winds howled outside, Emma often found herself sitting quietly in the hidden room, surrounded by the journals and blueprints that had become her guides. The stories of those who had come before infused her with strength, reminding her that hope could thrive even in the harshest conditions. Her unborn child stirred gently within her, a quiet promise of renewal amid the uncertainty. Emma's resolve hardened with each passing day. The warehouse was more than a building. It was a symbol of resilience, a sanctuary forged from struggle and solidarity. And as the community slowly rallied, whispers of support began to drown out the voices of doubt. The fight to preserve the warehouse was no longer hers alone. It had become a shared mission, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who refused to be erased. The morning sun cut through the warehouse's broken windows in sharp beams, dust particles swirling like tiny ghosts in the golden light. Emma stood near the entrance, watching the city wake around her, its harsh edges softened for a moment by the quiet dawn. But the fragile peace was shattered when the sleek black car rolled up the cracked pavement, its tires crunching over scattered gravel. Mr. Grayson stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed out of place against the backdrop of decay. His confident stride carried the weight of authority, and as he approached, the smugness in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Ms. Rivera," he began smoothly, extending a hand that Emma deliberately ignored. "I see you're still intent on staying here." His tone was both condescending and dismissive, as if her determination were a childish whim. Emma folded her arms, her gaze steady. "This place means more than just a patch of land to me." Grayson's smile tightened. "I represent a development company with plans to transform this neighborhood. Luxury condos, upscale shops, the kind of progress this area desperately needs." He gestured broadly, as if painting a picture of prosperity. "Your warehouse is sitting on prime real estate, and we're prepared to offer you a substantial sum to leave." Emma's jaw clenched. "I'm not interested in selling." He laughed softly, a sound void of warmth. "You don't understand the realities, Ms. Rivera. This isn't just about money. It's about safety, community, and the future. This warehouse isn't safe for you or your child. The building is decrepit, structurally unsound. You could be risking both your lives by staying." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm aware of the risks, but I'm not alone. This warehouse is a sanctuary. It's a legacy I intend to protect." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You're standing in the way of progress. There are bigger forces at work here, and resistance only delays the inevitable." Emma's voice was firm. "Progress that erases history isn't progress at all." His patience snapped. "Listen carefully. We're offering you one last chance to sell. After that, things will get complicated. You won't like what comes next." Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and strode back to his car, leaving a cold silence in his wake. Emma's heart pounded, the weight of his threat settling heavily on her shoulders. The battle had escalated beyond whispered rumors and neighborhood gossip. It was now a confrontation with power and greed, forces that cared little for the fragile sanctuary she was trying to build. In the days that followed, the pressure intensified. Representatives from the development firm appeared unannounced, surveying the warehouse with clinical detachment. Flyers warning of potential safety hazards were posted around the neighborhood, stoking fear and uncertainty. Rumors circulated that the city council was poised to approve demolition plans. But Emma refused to be cowed. She leaned on the small but growing community that had rallied around her. The neighbors who had once watched her with suspicion now stood as allies. Luis organized meetings in the warehouse's main hall, drawing local activists, historians, and residents to strategize resistance. Together, they uncovered old deeds and legal documents hidden in the warehouse's archives, proof that the building had been protected by a community trust established decades earlier. The discovery was a beacon of hope, a legal foothold to challenge the developer's claims. Emma pored over the documents late into the night, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating her determined face. The journals and blueprints she had found earlier took on new significance, weaving a narrative of resilience and community that stood in stark contrast to the developer's vision. One evening, as the warehouse echoed with the chatter of planning sessions, a threatening note was slipped under Emma's door. The words were blunt and chilling. "Leave now, or face the consequences." Fear flickered through her, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. This was no longer just about shelter. It was about defending a legacy, a community, and a future for her child. Luis stood beside her as she read the note, his expression grim but resolute. They want to scare you off, but we won't back down. Emma nodded, drawing strength from his presence. Together with their allies, they rallied neighbors to attend city council hearings and spread awareness through social media and local press. The fight was growing louder, a chorus of voices demanding recognition and respect. Amid the mounting tension, Emma found solace in small moments. A shared meal with Luis and other supporters, the laughter of children playing near the warehouse, the quiet comfort of the journals that chronicled past struggles and triumphs. Her body ached from the pregnancy's demands, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. The warehouse was more than walls and beams. It was a symbol of resistance against erasure. As the city prepared for a crucial hearing that would determine the warehouse's fate, Emma stood before a mirror, steadying herself. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not just by circumstance, but by purpose. The child she carried was a beacon of hope, a new chapter in a story of survival. Outside, the wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying with it the promise of change. Emma took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The fight was far from over, but she was no longer alone. With her community beside her, she would protect this sanctuary at any cost. The early morning light filtered through grimy warehouse windows, casting pale rectangles across the cluttered floor. Emma's breath came steady, but measured as she crouched beside a loose floorboard she discovered days earlier. With gentle but determined hands, she pried it open, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. The air that rose was cool and faintly musty, whispering of secrets long buried. Luis stood nearby, flashlight in hand, his face a mixture of curiosity and cautious excitement. "You really think these tunnels are still intact?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded, her fingers brushing the rough edges of the opening. The blueprints showed hidden rooms and secret tunnels beneath the warehouse. If we can find them, it could make all the difference. Safe spaces, shelter, even escape routes. Together, they stepped down into the dim corridor. The walls were lined with aged bricks, worn smooth by time and moisture. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone, mingling with the distant drip of water. The tunnel twisted and turned, a labyrinth carved beneath the city's forgotten edge. Emma's flashlight beam danced over alcoves and doorways, revealing small chambers once used for storage or refuge. She imagined families huddled here, sharing whispered conversations, protecting one another from the harsh world above. Luis paused, shining his light on a narrow hatch set into the floor. "This looks promising," he said, kneeling to test its weight. With effort, they lifted it, uncovering a tiny room filled with crates and old supplies, canned goods, blankets, and worn clothing carefully preserved. It was a hidden cache, a testament to the foresight of those who had built this network. Emma's heart swelled with hope. They planned for this. They thought about the future. As they explored deeper, they found faded markings on the walls, symbols and signs left to guide those seeking shelter. Some looked like maps, others, warnings or messages of solidarity. The tunnels were more than just passageways. They were lifelines, veins of safety beneath the city's indifferent surface. Emma felt the weight of generations pressing against her, a lineage of resilience she was now part of. Back in the main warehouse, Emma spread out the blueprints and photographs alongside the journals she had found. The images showed the warehouse bustling with life. Children playing beneath wooden beams, neighbors sharing meals in makeshift kitchens, community meetings held around long tables. The contrast with the present silence was stark but inspiring. Luis leaned over the papers, his brow furrowed. If we can restore these tunnels and make them safe again, it could be a sanctuary for others like you. Pregnant women, families in need, people with nowhere else to go. Emma's gaze was steady, determination etched into her features. That's exactly what this place was before. And it can be again. Together, they began mapping the tunnels, noting areas needing repair and potential hazards. They gathered tools and materials from donations and scavenged what they could from abandoned lots nearby. The work was grueling, made all the more challenging by Emma's advancing pregnancy and the warehouse's crumbling structure. Yet every repaired beam, every cleared passage was a small victory, a step toward reclaiming the warehouse's legacy. Outside, the neighborhood's attitude was shifting. Some who had once whispered suspicion were now offering quiet support. A few volunteers joined the restoration efforts, drawn by Emma's unwavering spirit and the promise of a safe haven. But the threat from the developers remained. Flyers warning of demolition circulated, and city council meetings loomed on the horizon. The battle for the warehouse was becoming a fight not only for a building, but for the soul of the community. Late one evening, as Emma sat by the faint glow of a lamp, she penned a letter to the city council. She wrote of the warehouse's history, the hidden tunnels, and the community's need for sanctuary. She spoke of resilience, hope, and the power of collective memory. Luis sat beside her, offering quiet encouragement. "We're not just fighting for a building," he said softly. "We're fighting for people's lives." Emma nodded, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and fierce determination. "And we'll do whatever it takes." The warehouse, once a forgotten shell, was stirring with purpose. Its hidden depths and stories of solidarity were now weapons against erasure. Emma was no longer just a tenant. She was a guardian of a legacy, ready to transform this place into a sanctuary that would shelter not only her child, but generations to come. As the night deepened, the sounds of the city faded, leaving only the steady rhythm of hope echoing beneath the warehouse's battered walls. The warehouse, once a silent monument to neglect, now pulsed with life. The vast main hall, bathed in the golden light filtering through broken windows, was filled with the low murmur of gathered voices. Emma stood near the center, watching as neighbors, local activists, and a few curious onlookers settled into worn chairs and makeshift benches. The air was thick with a mix of determination and cautious hope. Luis moved through the crowd, distributing flyers and encouraging quiet conversations. The meeting was their first organized effort to mobilize the community, to build a united front against the looming threat posed by the developers and city officials eager to erase the warehouse's history and its fragile new life. Emma's voice was steady as she addressed the gathering. "This warehouse is more than just a building. It's a symbol of resilience, a sanctuary that has sheltered generations before us and can do so again. We're here not just to save a structure, but to protect a community, to fight for a future where no one is left behind." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Faces once wary now shone with shared purpose. Among them were young parents, elderly residents, and local historians, each bringing their own stories, fears, and hopes. A woman named Carla, a longtime neighbor, stood to speak. "I grew up near here. I remember when this warehouse was alive with people helping each other. It was a place where no one was judged, where we were family. Losing that means losing a part of ourselves." The stories flowed, weaving a tapestry of collective memory that strengthened their resolve. Emma listened, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the power of unity. Outside, the city's machinery of change pressed relentlessly forward. Flyers warning of demolition and redevelopment plans appeared around the neighborhood, stirring anxiety. Yet, Within the warehouse, a countercurrent of resistance was gaining momentum. Emma and Luis worked tirelessly, organizing petitions, coordinating with local advocacy groups, and reaching out to city council members. They leveraged social media to share the warehouse's history and the community's vision, drawing attention from beyond their neighborhood. One afternoon, a group of volunteers arrived, ready to help with repairs and preparations for upcoming public meetings. The warehouse buzzed with activity, painting walls, clearing debris, and setting up displays of photographs and documents that told the story of the warehouse's past. Emma found herself drawn back to the hidden room where the journals and letters were kept. She arranged them carefully on a table, preparing to share their contents with visitors. These artifacts were more than relics. They were the lifeblood of their campaign, tangible proof of the warehouse's significance. As the days passed, Mr. Grayson's tactics grew more aggressive. Representatives from the development firm appeared unannounced, attempting to intimidate residents and disrupt meetings. Threatening notes and graffiti appeared around the warehouse, efforts to sow fear and division. But the community held firm. At a particularly tense meeting, Emma stood before the city council, her voice unwavering. She recounted the warehouse's history, the discovery of the tunnels and hidden rooms, and the plans to restore the space as a sanctuary for vulnerable families. She spoke of the neighbors who had come together, of the hope that had been rekindled within these walls. The council members listened, some skeptical, others moved by the testimony. Outside, a crowd of supporters gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans that echoed through the streets. The fight to preserve the warehouse had become a public cause, a symbol of resistance against displacement and erasure. Back inside, Emma felt the weight of the moment. The warehouse's future hung in the balance, but the community's spirit was undeniable. Luis approached her quietly. "No matter what happens, you've brought people together. You've given this place a new life." Emma smiled, exhaustion and determination mingling in her eyes. "We're just getting started." The storm outside gathered strength, but within the warehouse, a fire burned brighter than ever. A fire fueled by history, hope, and the unyielding will to protect what mattered most. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors lingered, sharing stories and plans. The warehouse had transformed from a forgotten shell into a beacon of solidarity, a testament to the power of community in the face of adversity. Emma looked around at the faces illuminated by flickering candlelight, feeling a profound sense of connection. This was more than a fight for bricks and mortar. It was a fight for dignity, for belonging, for the right to a safe place to call home. And as the night deepened, the warehouse stood strong, its walls echoing with the voices of those who refused to be silenced. The morning of the city council hearing dawned gray and heavy, clouds hanging low over the industrial district like a shroud. Emma stood at the entrance of the warehouse, her breath visible in the cold air, fingers trembling slightly as she cradled her belly. The weight of the day pressed down on her. Months of struggle, resistance, and hope had led to this moment. Inside, the warehouse buzzed with quiet activity. Neighbors and supporters gathered, a sea of faces marked by determination and fatigue. Luis moved between groups, offering quiet reassurances and last-minute encouragement. The hidden room, once a secret sanctuary, was now a small hub of preparation. Its journals and blueprints carefully displayed to remind everyone of the legacy they were fighting to protect. As the hours passed, tension mounted. Emma's contractions began subtly at first, a faint tightening that she tried to ignore. She paced the worn floorboards, her mind torn between the urgency of the hearing and the life growing inside her. The community's fight was far from over, Yet nature had its own timetable. The city council chambers were packed when Emma took the podium. The room was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth and grit of the warehouse. Council members sat behind a long desk, their expressions a mix of skepticism and politeness. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and the weight of public scrutiny settled over the proceedings. Emma's voice was steady, but passionate as she spoke. She recounted the warehouse's rich history as a shelter for marginalized families, the discovery of hidden tunnels and safe rooms, and the community's ongoing efforts to restore the space. She shared stories from neighbors, their struggles, their hopes, their dreams for a sanctuary that could once again offer refuge. She spoke of resilience, of legacy, and of the fundamental right to a safe home. Each word carried the weight of her own journey, the sacrifices made, and the child she was soon to bring into the world. As she finished, applause rippled through the room. Some council members exchanged glances, others scribbled notes. The hearing continued with testimonies from local historians, activists, and neighbors, all echoing Emma's call for preservation. Outside, a crowd gathered in solidarity, their chants and signs a chorus of support that filled the streets. The warehouse had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those fighting displacement and erasure. Suddenly, amid the tension, Emma felt a sharp, undeniable wave of pain. Her hand flew to her belly as contractions grew stronger. Panic flickered briefly, but she breathed deeply, steadying herself. Luis was at her side in an instant, guiding her gently. "We'll get you to safety. You're not alone." Back at the warehouse, Mrs. Winters, the caretaker, hurried to prepare a quiet room. The community rallied around Emma, their fear mingled with hope as they surrounded her with warmth and care. Hours passed in a blur of urgency and tenderness. Emma labored in the very space that had become a sanctuary for so many. The warehouse's walls absorbed the quiet strength of the moment, bearing witness to a new beginning. When the cries of new life finally pierced the air, a collective breath was released. Emma held her daughter, small and fragile, naming her Elela Nena, in honor of the great-aunt who had preserved the family legacy decades before. The birth was a beacon of hope amid the struggle, a reminder that life and community endure even in the face of adversity. As dawn broke, news arrived that the city council had voted to grant the warehouse protected status as a historic community site. The developers' plans were halted, the sanctuary preserved. The warehouse, once a forgotten relic, had become a home once more. Emma, cradling Elela Nena, looked out over the faces of neighbors and friends gathered around her. In their eyes shone gratitude, determination, and a shared promise to protect what they had rebuilt together. The fight had been long and hard, but the legacy of hope and resilience lived on. And as the first light of morning bathed Thornfield Warehouse in a soft glow, Emma knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. For her family, for the community, and for all who would find refuge within these walls. The morning sun filtered softly through the large, patched windows of the warehouse, casting a warm glow over the bustling activity within. The once neglected structure had transformed into a lively community center, its walls reverberating with laughter, conversation, and the quiet hum of support. Emma stood near the entrance, a serene smile lighting her face as she watched mothers cradling newborns, children playing in makeshift corners, and volunteers organizing supplies. The air was thick with hope and renewal, a stark contrast to the silence and dust that had once filled these rooms. Emma's daughter, Elela Nena, nestled against her chest, cooed softly, her tiny fingers curling around Emma's necklace. The birth of her child had marked a turning point, not only for Emma, but for the entire community that had rallied to preserve this sanctuary. The warehouse had become more than a refuge. It was a beacon of resilience and solidarity. Walls that once echoed with emptiness now held the stories of countless women finding strength and support within its embrace. Programs for expectant mothers, parenting classes, and counseling sessions filled the calendar, all driven by Emma's unwavering commitment to transform hardship into hope. Mrs. Winters, the longtime caretaker, moved gracefully through the rooms, her eyes shining with pride. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" she said softly, approaching Emma. "From forgotten ruins to a haven for so many." Emma nodded, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant scene. "This place has always been about more than bricks and mortar. It's about community, about giving people a chance when the world turns its back." Louise joined them, carrying a box of donated clothes for the center. The support keeps growing. People want to be part of something meaningful, something that makes a difference. Outside, the city had begun to recognize the warehouse's significance. Local officials visited to learn about the programs, and funding opportunities opened to sustain the center's work. The fight to protect the building had ignited a broader conversation about preserving history and supporting vulnerable populations. Emma often found herself reflecting on the journey, the loneliness, the threats, the moments of doubt. Yet through it all, a quiet strength had carried her forward, fueled by the legacy of those who had come before and the promise of the future she now held in her arms. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Emma gathered with a circle of women in the main hall. They shared stories of struggle and triumph, their voices weaving a tapestry of resilience. Elena giggled as she was passed from arms to arms, a living symbol of hope. The warehouse had become a sanctuary not only for bodies, but for souls, a place where healing began and futures were rewritten. Emma's gaze lingered on a faded photograph hung on the wall, a portrait of the great-aunt who had preserved the family's legacy. It was a reminder that the past was never truly gone, but lived on in the actions and courage of those who carried its torch. As night fell, the warehouse settled into a gentle quiet. Emma tucked Elena into a small crib nestled in the corner of her office, pausing to whisper a promise to the child. "You are part of something strong, something enduring. This is your home." Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, a vast expanse of possibility stretching out beyond the warehouse's sturdy walls. Emma stepped onto the worn steps, breathing in the cool night air. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but the Thornfield warehouse was no longer a place of despair. It was a beacon, a testament to the power of community, resilience, and hope. With her daughter by her side and the support of a united neighborhood, Emma embraced the future, knowing that the legacy she had fought for would continue to inspire generations to come.